My sisters and brothers, the Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and he stayed close to the sea. One of the synagogue officials, named Jairus, came forward. Seeing Jesus, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him, saying, "My daughter is at the point of death. Please come lay your hands on her, that she may get well and live." Jesus went off with Jairus, and a large crowd followed him and pressed upon him. There was a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years. She had suffered greatly at the hands of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Yet she was not helped, but only grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. She said, "If I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured." Immediately her flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. Jesus, aware at once that power had gone out from him, turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who has touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to Jesus, "You see how the crowd is pressing upon you, and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. The woman, realizing what had happened to her, approached in fear and trembling. She fell down before Jesus and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be cured of your affliction." While Jesus was still speaking, people from the synagogue official's house arrived and said, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher any longer?" Disregarding the message that was reported, Jesus said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid, just have faith." He did not allow anyone to accompany him inside except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they arrived at the house of the synagogue official, Jesus caught sight of a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. So he went in and said to them, "Why this commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but asleep." And they ridiculed Jesus. Then he put them all out. He took along the child's father and mother and those who were with him and entered the house where the child was. He took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha koum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." The girl, a child of 12, arose immediately and walked around. At that, they were utterly astounded. Jesus gave strict orders that no one should know this and said that the girl should be given something to eat. The Gospel of the Lord. Before I talk about the gospel, I want to invite you to my Facebook page, Alberto Esposito. Well, in Italy they say Esposito, but whatever. And then in parentheses, there's Father Al. And every week I put on Facebook a few articles to help us prepare for the Sunday readings. You know, I try the best I can to immerse myself in the lectionary so I can become a better preacher. And this past week, I invited people to comment on the passages. And I received a lot of comments, but I want to share just one. And he refers to the story of Jesus bringing this young girl to life. She was only 12. Which of our altar servers are 12 years old? Any of you? Any 12-year-olds here today? Isn't that amazing? Well, anyway, this is what he wrote. As the father of my children, the part of the gospel that touched me most was he took along the child's father and mother and those who were with him and entered the room where the child was. This passage reveals to me Christ's compassionate thoughtfulness and tenderness. He invites the dead child's parents to come into the room with him to witness their child's coming back from the dead. A very beautiful insight. And this is how we're called to read the Scriptures, how the Scriptures speak to us today. They were written 2,000 years ago, but they're more relevant than ever. And when you come to a Bible study, which I'm going to start soon, or comment on Facebook, you're collaborating with me in shaping the message, how it's revealed today. And so, in the gospel today, we meet a synagogue official. Do you remember his name? Jairus. And we also meet a woman who has been sick for many years. And I want to focus on the woman for a moment. Do you remember how many years she was hemorrhaging? 12. Now, why in the world would Mark choose the number 12? Well, 12 in the Bible is a symbolic number. 4 represents the infinite goodness of God, and 3 represents the perfection of God. So, in the Hebrew mind, 4 times 3 would be a lot. So this woman was suffering for many, many years. And she went to all the best doctors. She went to the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, and then Minnesota, and she went to North Florida Hospital. Is that what it's called? And she went to Shands, and on and on and on. And the more money she spent, the worse she got. And she was suffering not only physically, but emotionally and spiritually. I imagine some of you have been seriously ill, no? And doesn't that have an effect on your heart? Start getting kind of down, frustrated, maybe even desperate. And so this woman, one day, hears about the reputation of Jesus, this wonder worker from Galilee. Now, Galilee was not highly considered in the first century. People used to say, can anything good come from Galilee? Can anything good come from Brooklyn? I guess so. Well, she said, I'm going to take a shot with this Galilean. So she went into town, and of course the crowd was pressing on Jesus. And she's been losing blood for years, and so she's very weak. So use your imagination a moment. You know, she's struggling to get to Jesus. And finally she says, if I can only touch the hem of his garment, I'll be healed. And Edna created this beautiful garment right here, the garment of Jesus flowing from the baptismal waters, a very beautiful image. And the moment she touched Jesus, what happened? She was healed. And then Jesus said, who touched me? And the disciples, they're so funny. They're so practical. Well, there's a big crowd here. What does it matter who touched you, Jesus? You know. And Jesus is, looking at the crowd. I don't know if any of you watched the show Monk, when Monk kind of images the room, So Jesus is imaging the crowd, and his eyes meet the woman's eyes. The gaze of love, the gaze of recognition, because all of us recognize when Jesus gazes on us, and it invites a response. And so Mark tells us that the woman fell on the ground and revealed to Jesus the whole truth. She opened up her heart, years of physical pain, years of emotional pain, years of spiritual pain. And Jesus is unlike Benny Hinn. You ever see Benny Hinn? He hits people on the forehead and they fall on the ground. Jesus says, not, I have healed you, I'm from Galilee, and I'm good. No. Jesus says what? Remember? Your faith has healed you. Go in peace. And so this begs a question. What does the word faith mean in the New Testament? Well, it's a Greek word. And that word is pistis, P-I-S-T-I-S. And the word pistis means confidence. It doesn't mean what you believe intellectually. It means that in your heart, you know that God is worthy of my confidence. And I think in the Catholic Church today, we need a renewal of this confidence in Jesus Christ. Would you say amen to that? Have